This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
For being the first game, really good. I mean, it was guys were sacrificing themselves like it's in the playoffs, you know. So blocking shots and stuff. So unreal job by everyone. The new guys, the young guys, everyone did a great job.
Everybody did do a good job. There was some power play opportunities for the Canes, which, you know, maybe inflated that shot total for them. But the regulars for the Lightning last night, for the most part, I thought were their best players. And let me bring in my partner who called the game. I want to obviously get his thoughts, Dave Mishkin, and our audience, Apple It's Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation. Glad you're with us. We've got another game tonight. Preseason kind of stacking here this week, and you can listen to all the action right here. But, you know, partner, it's funny. We were talking different segments of our shows over the last 3 show appearances with Jonas Johansson and how he looked and how comfortable we were with him being the backup. He played well last night. Might have been their best player. Mitchell Chaffee was somebody we've kind of looked at and said, you know, we like some of the tools in that toolbox. And, you know, where does he fit in? Don't know. What we do know is that a little older, plays chippy. When he does, he's more effective. He had an effective game. We talked about Connor Geeky and kind of his next progression as a player, and he showed pretty well. And then, you know, Emil Lilleberg yesterday, who, as you mentioned a number of times, the puck was finding him. Some good, some bad last night, of course. But, you know, he had a goal and was active. And there were some other performances that we can get into. We've got an hour to discuss. But I thought general observation for me, and I'm curious your thoughts, was that, you know, the ones who had some NHL experience last night for Tampa Bay led the way, and they were noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and I said as much on the air, and you can look at the stat sheet that was more littered with penalties than it was with goals, which sometimes happens, particularly in these early preseason games. But usually what you see in these first couple of preseason games is a lot of helter-skelter play.
Yeah.
It's just players on both sides are getting kind of reacclimated to we'll call it real competition. You're not just scrimmaging against your teammates. You also have hodgepodge lineups. You know, most players are playing with, you know, line mates or D partners that they are not overly familiar with rare exception. And the opponent is unfamiliar. Right. So I think last night fit into that category. It was a little helter-skelter. It was not a particularly smoothly played game. So if that's the case, what are you looking for? You're looking for kind of compete, and you're looking for guys to go out there and try and make a difference best they can. And I think the Lightning had a lot of guys who check that box. And yes, at the end of the night, you know, the quote-unquote NHLers that played for the Lightning last night had an impact. Chaffee had a goal and an assist. Geeky had 2 assists. Lilleberg had a goal and 3 penalties. But, you know, he also drew a penalty. He had a breakaway coming out of the penalty box. Right. You know, he was impactful. And, of course, as you mentioned, Johansson may have been their best player, and that's very good to see. But beyond that, you know, we're kind of wondering, is someone going to catch our eye, or maybe more than one person catch our eye? And I mentioned it a couple times on the air last night. Stahoviak, to me, was very noticeable in a very positive way. And he's got a lot of W's in his name, and he's got a lot of vowels in his name. So people were like, how are you saying this name? I did.
What's his nickname?
Him.
What's his nickname?
Probably W.
I feel like that would be much better for somebody like me and Phil. Obviously, you have to know his name.
Well, it actually sounds simpler than it looks. So he told
me,
and again, I said yesterday, this may not be exactly translated in how it sounds in his native Poland, but it's Wojtek Stahoviak. So the W sound like V's.
Yeah, right.
But whether you say it with a W sound or a V sound, there's no disputing that he was impactful last night. When I just said, like, go out there and try and have an impact on the game, I think he did that. And so he didn't get a point on the Lilleberg goal, but Bradley Nadeau is a first-round pick of Carolina. He was a late first-round pick, but he got into a couple of games last year at the end of the regular season. He's a prospect for them. He is. And, he fumbled the puck away in his own zone with, 5 seconds left in the first period? A period in which Carolina had actually probably had the run of play, particularly from the middle of that first period on. And that was a needless turnover, but who's there to steal the puck? Stahoviak. And he makes a play to Geekie, who then throws it into the middle and a nicked off Chafee's stick before it reached Littleberg. That's why Chafee got the primary assist. But Stahoviak kind of was the guy who started the play. He was seeing power play. He was seeing penalty kill. He was seeing the 5-on-6, when Carolina pulled the goalie. So, John Cooper was seeing a lot of stuff that he liked. He kept throwing the guy out there. I liked Peltier, who, by the way, there are 3 players, Peltier is one of them, who played last night, who are also playing tonight. So we can kind of look in the lineup for tonight.
Yeah, that'd be good.
But Peltier is one of them. Boris Kachuk is another. And then Steven Santini is the third. So 2 forwards, 1 defenseman. But I remember watching Peltier briefly in that he didn't play every game that the Lightning played against the Flames since he's been in the NHL. He's been injured and, he was in the minors and then he got traded to Philly. He was in that Morgan Frost deal, Joel Farabee deal. So he was in Philly. I want to say that he did play against the Lightning in one of the later games the Lightning had against the Flyers last year. I may not be remembering that right. But I didn't really have a really concrete impression of him, except that, he's not the biggest guy. He's not. And I thought he had an impactful game last night. I thought, he was hungry on pucks. He definitely has playmaking ability. There was a reason why this guy was a first-round pick. So can he translate his playmaking ability into basically an effective playmaker at the NHL level? And we've seen flashes of it, I think, in the time that he's been a pro and in the NHL. But I liked his game last night. Like, you could see he's got very good hockey instincts. And that might be one reason why the Lightning, who value high hockey IQ, right? Like, they went out and signed him when the Flyers didn't qualify him. And I like Kachuk's game. He took a penalty in the third period that led to the Carolina power play goal that may have been avoidable. But he made up for it. He played with a fire in his belly, Greg. Like, he was blocking shots and being engaged. That's really what I'm talking about. So those are just a few of the guys that I thought did well. I thought Duke had a good game too. Like, if Duke is in the mix for making the open night roster, I don't think he did anything last night to hurt his chances. The same with Finley. I thought Finley had a good game. He's going to get another game, and have to continue to show it. And these later games, as we get more NHLers into these games, we'll get a clearer picture of it. But understanding that, you're going to have the helter-skelter kind of environment, and that's going to be part of what you're going to see in these early games. I thought the Lightning showed about as well as they could hope to show. And I think I mentioned to you post-game, the fact that it was 2-1 with 4 minutes left, they kind of had to dig in and find a way to get that game across the finish line. I don't care it was preseason. It wasn't 5-1, for or against. This was a game that, Carolina was trying to tie the game, and they had a lot of their NHLers out there to tie the game. Blake, Stankoven, Hall, Nikishin. This guy is a player. I was very impressed with him, but he was out there. And, the Lightning had to find a way to defend that 1-goal lead, and they did it.
Let's touch on Kachuk, because I think he is interesting. He was involved in a pretty significant trade, ends up being from the Lightning's perspective. At the time, I think a lot of people felt like, hey, way too much to give up, for a guy like Hagel. But I think Kachuk was supposed to be a guy that if he wasn't going to be in a top 6, and he's got some pedigree, at least in terms of his draft status, he was going to be a guy that was an NHLer. And it feels like since that move, it's been inconsistent. And maybe that's not a surprise when you start talking about younger players and dealing with some adversity and getting moved around. But Eric mentioned that yesterday, too, on the show, that he felt like Kachuk was noticeable. And I don't know what his ceiling is, partner, but he is a guy with a lot of, relatively speaking, nice to have NHL experience in your system, and a guy that if he keeps his game simple, which is forechecking, be hard on pucks, is that what the Lightning are asking him to do when called upon? So I think he's also probably looking at second time around. I got to start showing something here if I want to be considered an NHLer, because I don't want to be pigeonholed as that 4A type player.
Right.
He
also has the benefit. I mean, we don't often talk about this, Greg, about these guys who are in the Chaffee age range, which Chaffee's in a little bit of a different boat than Kachuk, because Chaffee's been in the NHL regularly the last couple of years. But what they have now at 26, 27, 28 that they didn't have when they were, 20, 21, 22 is experience. Like, they know what it means to be a pro. Now, you're right. Maybe they need to find a way to elevate their game from, however you framed it, 4A, to a guy that will be in the NHL and be, relied on to perform at the NHL level regularly. Obviously, Boris hasn't had that happen yet. In Chicago, in Pittsburgh, with the Lightning. I mean, he was up with the Lightning the year of the trade with Hagel, but honestly, he was kind of in and out of the lineup. So what I've noticed from him is just he's playing with a lot more confidence, honestly. Like last night, he looked like a guy who'd been a pro player for a number of years, as opposed to those early years where he honestly was like the four guys that were just drafted who played last night. I thought Baldwin was the most noticeable, in part because he played defense, so he played more than the three guys who were on the fourth line. But, they kind of look like, hey, we're trying to figure this out. Like 3 months ago, like Baldwin was like 3 months ago, he was playing against high schoolers. I mean,
asked him that question.
Not 3 months ago, but, prior to 3 months ago, his competition was high schoolers. Now he's drafted, and within 3 months, he's playing in an NHL preseason game. And it wasn't a full NHL roster on the other side, but Taylor Hall was out there, Blake was out there when Baldwin was out there. He's playing against proven NHLers. So that's quite a leap, and you would expect that there's a little bit of like, all right, let me get my bearings here. For a guy like Kachuk, like that's not an issue anymore. He knows the ropes. And that's what you see from these guys who are, in their mid to late 20s or even older. Yeah. Scott Samarin is going to be in the lineup tonight. I think he's 32 or 33. Like, the Lightning signed him because, he's slated for Syracuse, but he knows the ropes. Mm-hmm. He's played in the NHL about 50 games, something like that. Mostly been an AHL player, but he's not going to go into the game tonight being like, all right, what do I need to do? Like, I don't want to make a mistake.
Sure.
They kind of know what's expected of them. Like, they know how to be a pro, right? Now, for Boris, you hope that he can make, for his sake, enough of an impact that, he gets enough attention cast on him and he demands that attention where he is a viable option if and when the Lightning need to, add someone at the NHL level.
Geekie played with a little fire in that belly, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe not a surprise. I guess I'm not shocked that he stood out in a very positive way, was willing to drop the gloves. We talked about that physical.
He took a knee-on-knee hit from Giovanni Smith, who's
a tough guy. And he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
Smith is a tough guy for sure. But, Geekie was noticeable, and, he had talked about working on that skating. That's going to be something that everybody watches. How does he look, with an extra season of training? But he looked like maybe he should have looked, right?
Yeah.
In a game like that. So that was positive. And then Chaffee, you always wonder how a veteran guy, you just mentioned somebody who has some NHL experience, but maybe isn't as younger as some of the prospects coming up when they play in that first game. Because it's so new, so many younger guys are in the lineup. As a veteran, how do you approach that game? Do you do anything differently? Are you trying to stay within yourself, or are you trying to do things a little bit more because you have more of that experience and you might be able to take advantage? It was interesting seeing Taylor Hall, in that situation. This is a guy who was an MVP, and here he is playing in the first preseason game. But sports is very interesting, and it's very, very simple. If you produce, for the most part, you will play. And you can't control who you play against. you have to show when you're given the opportunity. And for Chafee, I think every game he gets in is going to be an important one. Not to say that he is in jeopardy of not making the team. More of just, are you one of the 12 best?
Yeah.
Are you one of the 13 best up front where we're not even thinking about moving you or scratching you, that you're a guy that we can rely on? And so I think in addition to being productive, playing with an edge, I think once you get to Chafee's situation, it's consistency. Less bad games. Can you string together more good? And the ones that are a little off kilter, you're limiting those more and more as you become a professional.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we touched on that, I think yesterday, and so far so good for Chafee. He will get the night off tonight.
Oh, come on.
And he got the early morning shift off. But, the three guys that I mentioned, Santini, Peltier, and Kachuk, also got the morning off. So I don't know, they're like show up at the plane or whatever. But do you want to hear the lineup?
Let's get into the lineup because I think that'll be interesting.
Yes. Let me see where I have it. Actually, I have it written down here. So because the Lightning subbed three other guys, I'm not entirely certain if this is how the lines are going to run, but this for sure is the lineup. So I think we're looking at a line of Gonsalves, Holmberg, and Bjorkstrand. We'll call that the top line. I mean, those are two established NHLers, and then a third, Gonsalves, who has established himself last year as an NHLer. Then you have Peltier and Kachuk. Looks like they're on the same line like they were last night with Girgensons. So instead of Stahoviak, who was their center last night, looks like Girgensons is going to be their center tonight. Tristan Allard, who spent the last couple of years in Syracuse, is with Sam O'Reilly. Lightning acquired him in the Isaac Howard trade. And then Nick Abruzzese, who has been playing in the Toronto system the last several years. And then you have a line of Caden Petrie, who was a sixth-round pick of the Lightnings in 2024. Lucas Mercury, who was drafted by Carolina but did not come to terms with the Hurricanes. He was one of these guys who was an NCAA player and spent 4 years at UMass Amherst and didn't sign with Carolina, so the Lightning got him as a free agent. And then the guy I just mentioned, Scott Sabrin, who's a veteran pro player. That is the fourth line. The D, Carlisle and Radish. Groshev, who was moved to defense last year, is with Santini. And then Grant Spada, who was taken in the 7th round last summer, is with Roman Schmidt, who is a former, I believe, 3rd-round pick of the Lightning. He's been in the system for a few years. And then Brandon Halverson is the starter, and Caleb Heil is the backup. John Cooper did meet with the media this morning and said he may get Heil in for a period. So we'll see. So guys to look at, I mean, I think Gonsalves is an NHLer. I mean, he's been skating on the second line, but you'd like him to continue to move forward for sure. Bjorkstrand, you want him not to have any ill effects from having a significant surgery and then rehabbing over the summer.
Where does he line up in the power play, right? That'll be interesting.
Yes. For us. This will be a different looking power play tonight, but he'll be on it. Holmberg, I mean, I think the Lightning have high expectations that he will slot in really well for them. And, certainly I think there's going to be interest in how Sam O'Reilly looks, because the Lightning, I mean, they were going to trade Isaac Howard or let the clock run out and take the 2nd-round pick. He's the guy they got from that trade. So let's see how he looks. He's 19. He's still got another year of junior eligibility. The Lightning tend not to rush guys, but it's his opportunity to show his new organization what he can do. Beyond this prospect tournament, he was in that too.
Groshev's,
a week and a half ago.
He's interesting just because of the position change.
Yeah, that's another one.
I mean, I think just to see how that looks. You mentioned, was it Brian who had observed he looked pretty good?
Brian felt he was the most noticeable in a good way Lightning player in that 3-game tournament.
Yeah.
Which, for a guy playing a new position, that's not nothing. What I will say is that Groshev, unlike a lot of the other players in that tournament, is entering his 3rd-year pro. So just like we were talking about with Kachuk, like when it comes to that prospect tournament, Groshev knows the ropes, even though he was playing a new position. But it's good to see that that he showed well. Interestingly, Greg, I got the Nashville roster. The Predators are basically playing their NHL group tonight. So this is going to be a challenge for, we'll call it a similar lineup to what the Lightning dressed last night, which is to say some NHLers, but mostly non-NHLers. So, Stamkos is in tonight. Marchessault is in tonight. Yossi's in tonight. Brady Shea. Philip Forsberg. I think the top two goalies, Saros and Anunen, are going to be dressing. I'm guessing Saros is going to start. I don't know if they're going to give him the whole game. Nick Perbix is playing tonight. Of course, he signed with Nashville. Michael Bunting, they got him in a trade last year. So he's playing. So it's going to be a good challenge for a much younger / more inexperienced group on the Lightning side.
I think that makes it a little easier to, I don't want to say get motivated, but be a little bit more detail-oriented when you're going against some guys on the other side who have some NHL experience. They don't have to be stars up and down the lineup, but for a younger guy, you want to test yourself how you're going against some NHL-ready players. I think for veteran guys, and Gonçalves veteran to the extent that more experienced than some of these rookies because of his experience being in the pro game, but I think it's nice to go against some other NHLers as well. This isn't, hey, there's one NHLer on the other team and everybody else is, East Coast and American Hockey League. There's going to be some guys there that you've competed against. So I think maybe a better test tonight than yesterday for some of the younger players. You mentioned the goaltending. That absolutely stood out yesterday. Halverson playing tonight will be interesting just because we heard about his story last year, partner, and where is he fitting in all of this? The Lightning certainly want to accumulate some depth at that position, understanding, Vasi and Johansson and where they are. So that'll be interesting. And I think for a goaltender, it can probably be easy to get out of technique in games like this because things aren't as structured. You may have some young guys out of position, and do you start developing bad habits? I think, to me, that's one of the things that was somewhat impressive last night with Johansson, not to get, too over-detailed and think about the game too much and more for what it was. But, look, when you're on the shorthanded as many times as Tampa Bay was, and you guys are running around a little bit, and you can get out of sync.
And there were a couple of those Carolina power plays where basically they had the puck in the offensive zone for the full 2 minutes. Or one, they had it in the offensive zone for the full 2 minutes. There were a couple of others, or at least one other, where if the Lightning cleared it, like it was coming right back in. So Johansson was under pressure on some of those penalty kills.
He was. And I
also,
think
he faced more scoring chances, I think, than Primo did. And the Hurricanes had more shots. But
I think that's fair.
He was asked to do more, I think, than Caden Primo was asked to do last night.
I think that's fair. And Chief will say you like to see as much action as possible, but you also don't want to be peppered and let in 8 goals, even in an exhibition game, because I think sometimes maybe that can have a negative effect. But I thought that stood out, and I'm curious to see how the goaltending and defensively how things stand out, tonight. You mentioned Bjorkstrand. You want to obviously see that he's healthy, and yes, the power play will be a lot different today than it is at the start of the year, for sure. But if the thinking is let's get him into a position where he's going to be, regardless of where, Kucherov is lined up or Point is lined up, let's see how that looks. You want to get some reps. You want to get some game action. And I think that'll be interesting because we debated about that topic yesterday. Was it more about just getting Bjorkstrand in a position where he could be very good, but also away from a position where maybe he wasn't as comfortable, knowing that Braden Point maybe has a little bit more flexibility to his game and can adapt better than Bjorkstrand? The bottom line is you want those guys out together, get your best 5. Point and Bjorkstrand, you would think, partner, are part of that with the first unit. And let's see what Bjorkstrand can do, in that slot area with that nasty wrist shot. And maybe he gets an opportunity, maybe he doesn't, but I think get him in that position so he can start to be familiar with, setting up and the role that he's going to play. So I think that from a tactical perspective, that'll be interesting to see what that unit looks like. And then, of course, Radish. Look, we have had conversations about Lilleberg and Crozier potentially being that bottom pair for Tampa Bay on the back end. But Radish is going to have a say in all of that. And I think whether it is a one-timer on the power play, whether it's power play unit 1 or 2, or just being a pretty serviceable defenseman at this point for Tampa Bay, and he's in your top 6, I think, for him, is this a big preseason? I don't think he obviously is in danger of not making the team.
Yeah, he'll be on the roster.
But what's his role?
Exactly.
And I think that, you go from, how many games did he play last year? You go from playing the amount of games he played last year. Does he stay the same? Or because of the emergence of some other players on the back end, does his time decrease a little bit and he's more of that spare part that comes in and out of the lineup, but you like him, he's reliable, and you know that he's got a big shot and you can use him to your advantage, when his number is called. So I think just his season in general, but I think the start of the season, kind of having an idea of where the Lightning see him and who he's going to be playing with is going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, I agree. So, look, we're going to get more information about how these players are stacked organizationally.
That's a fair point to say.
Not only from their performance in these early games, but also who stays and who gets more games. So it says something to me that Peltier, Kachuk, and Steven Santini are getting both of these games. Because I don't know that before last night's game, they definitively decided that those 3 players were going to get 2 games in a row. So it's almost like, okay, we want to see a little bit more. Santini is I think he's farther down on the depth chart in terms of the defense core. You've got on the right side, I'll include Moser, Chernak, Crozier, and Radish, and then Santini. So that part is kind of working against him unless he can elevate. But he has a lot of NHL experience. The Lightning brought him up last year to play a couple of games, and he did just fine. And obviously, he showed enough last night that they're like, okay, we want to see you play again. He also got thrown out with whatever it was 10 minutes left in the third period because he took a minor penalty, and then they gave him and the Carolina receiver of that hit a 10-minute misconduct. So he didn't play quite as much as some of the other guys. But
Peltier is on a 2-way deal too, right? Correct?
Peltier signed a 3-year deal. Year 1 is a 2-way deal, okay. But years 2 and 3 are 1-way deals.
Do you draw any conclusion to that? With
it's probably to entice the player to sign. Yeah. Without looking at the numbers, I have a feeling that, we're talking about within the range of the league minimum, so that if they decided to send him to the minors on a 1-way, they would still pay him the money, but the cap hit would be 0. I guess I can look up Puckpedia and see exactly what his deal is, but that's more an incentive to a player. First of all, he's getting 3 years, and second of all, years 2 and 3 are 1-way contracts. So even if he ends up in the minors, because we don't know. We don't know how this is going to unfold within this year. Maybe he struggles to get to the NHL, and he's on a 1-way deal a year from now, and they're like, well, we don't know if we're going to be able to keep him in the NHL, but if we have to send him to the minors, the cap hit is 0 or close to 0. For the player, he's like, okay, I'm getting a 3-year deal, and I know I'm getting 1-way money no matter what, years 2 and 3. So that's how I would interpret it.
Look,
who knows how many other offers are out there, too? I'm seeing like Luke Glendening, I think. He's 35, 36, right? So that's working against him, but he's still a tremendous asset in the faceoff circle. I think he signed a PTO somewhere. So he may be looking, So if you get an offer, I know Peltier's in a different boat because he's a lot younger, but you get an offer.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a pretty good deal for you at that point in your career. I'm not surprised that he took it.
I would agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's get to some questions, unless you wanted to touch on anything else more coming.
Well, I will add one last thing about the Carolina Hurricanes' new road jerseys, which they made a change to their road jerseys. We did not see their home jerseys last night because I think they wanted to wear the new jerseys in front of their fans. So it may be that their previous home jersey, which they wear red and they wear black, but they're very similar. The logo is a little different on the black, but like the number scheme is the same. That maybe is exactly how it's been. All I know is that these road jerseys, I saw Mike Maniscalco after the game, and I said, you are going to be hearing a lot of our colleagues about these jerseys. So the biggest complaint about the Carolina Hurricanes uniform from broadcasters, both play-by-play and color, is that the numbers are small and kind of close together. They never really bothered me so much because the contrast was always good. White on red, or red on white, or white on black. The number on the back on the new road jersey is actually bigger, so it's easier to see. But the number on the sleeve is unreadable, Greg. It is unreadable from the press box. They might as well not have a number on the sleeve. The sleeve is red, and they put a black number on the red. And I think this is kind of a it's similar to what they wore for their Stadium Series game a couple of years ago. That I think was a black jersey with red numbers. But anyway, they took this concept from that Stadium Series jersey. And they're like, oh, this is great. And yeah, like they'll probably sell a lot of jerseys if, people like, I love black on red. Like, I don't mind black on red if I'm wearing a T-shirt or a jersey or something like that. But the jersey serves a purpose. The number serves a purpose to identify the player. And, if it's hard to see from these press boxes, then that makes everyone's job harder, not just the broadcasters, the off-ice officials, and people watching on TV. May have trouble. So we'll see. That was my takeaway. I got through the game. Like I kind of by hook or by crook, like, okay, I think I know what Logan Stankoven looks like. And, this Nikishin, he has a distinct style. And, if they turned, you could see the number in the back. But this game I did it right there. This game at Benchmark International Arena on Friday, I can guarantee you that the Hurricanes are going to be wearing those white jerseys again with the sleeve. So that, incidentally, is the first game that Dave Randorf and Brian Engblom are doing on the spot. So Carolina is doing them no favors, unless they wear their reds. If they wear their reds, a different story.
I'm curious, anyway. Jerseys. Can jerseys throw you off a little bit if you're paying too much attention to trying to find who it is?
Greg, look, you've done enough play-by-play.
I know.
If you can't see the number, you're fishing.
Yeah.
You have to find another way to determine how you can identify the player. And to me, it is a line that should never be crossed. But there is no safety valve in this process where somebody at the league is taking a look at this new mock-up and saying, this does not pass muster.
Right.
Because this number on the sleeve is readable if you're 10 feet from it.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're sitting in the lower bowl, you can see. But we have people who are actually trying to do jobs that are, tied to their ability to be able to see a number from distance. And this does not pass muster. And it's not, I don't mean to be picking on Carolina because we've seen it through the years. The Lightning themselves in their back and black jerseys, like other broadcasters, we cannot see these numbers.
Go the Bob Prince route. Yeah, the Bolts had it down.
That is the other way to go. Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, they have it. We have it. Or just everybody is no matter who has the puck, it's the same player. That's another way to go.
That's right.
For sure.
I love that.
Anyway.
That's great.
So that I don't think will be welcomed with open arms by the broadcasters around. We do have a Broadcasters Association. Maybe I should bring this up one year and be like,
hey guys, what do you think of this
when
philosophy?
There's a jersey change, can we please have somebody advocating for us?
Yes, because there's nobody that's doing it right now.
All right, Steve wrote, Dave and Brian called Carolina on those jerseys in the prospect tournament. Yes, Steve. But you know what? Wesley Chapel, you're on top of the ice.
Good point.
You're a lot closer. Anywho.
I get it.
Yeah.
Let's get to some questions. Dave on YouTube. Could Hooten see some looks in that left circle spot when he's healthy? He probably has the best one-timer for writing the organization and bring some intangibles.
Well, it wouldn't be imminent. First of all, he is hurt, and he has no NHL experience. So I think it's very unlikely that they would be like, hey, this guy is a bomb and can shoot a one-timer. Let's bring him up when he's not ready for, other parts of his game that need to adapt to the NHL level. But down the road, sure. I confess, I've not seen much of Hooten. I don't believe he has gotten into a preseason game. I've seen him in the development camp, the 3-on-3 tournament. But my exposure to him and his game has been very limited. So the fan may know more than me. But I remember hearing about his shot when the Lightning drafted him. He was a late pick. I think he was in the 7th round, and they said his skating needed a lot of work. And since then, I think his skating has improved. But currently, he is injured.
Dusty, the dog, on X says, who leads the league in too many men on the ice penalties?
Well, that's something you can look up. The Lightning had a handful last year. So they took one last night, and that was just somebody dropped the ball. They had 6 guys skating around on the ice. Sometimes the too many men penalties are a little unlucky. Like somebody's at the bench, and the puck hits them, and it's almost like the music stopped, and you're looking for a chair, and you're like, oh no, right? Like there's not much you can do about that, and sometimes you get those penalties too.
I know Phil, that bothers him.
Being aware on the bench. If you are going on, you have to make sure the guy that you were changing for is coming off, and that's how you get the 6 guys on the ice. Or there's confusion because 2 guys think they're up, so one guy comes off and 2 guys jump on because they both think they're the right winger on this particular line because maybe they've mixed up the lines.
Let's get to Michael on YouTube. Super excited about Stachowiak. I'm pronouncing that correctly? Right?
Stachowiak,
that's right. He's been terrorizing what team did he play for last
Played in
year?
Germany.
So that his best friend follows. He says we're both excited. He's in our system and not tearing up Frankfurt anymore. So
clearly he played against Frankfurt.
Yeah. And he's, 26?
So he spent 2 years at Michigan State before going back overseas.
I want to say he's a little older, isn't he? I mean, definitely.
He has a 99 birthday, so you're right, Greg, 26.
So, I mean, that probably stands out, right? A little bit more.
He played with poise last night. He played like a guy, as I said. It wasn't his first rodeo.
Yes. And that came out. So, Michael, yes, that is for sure something to continue to see his progression, because I think guys like that, you may see him into the second week. If he's playing with poise, and you're like, okay, let's see what this guy looks like against more NHLers. I mean, it may make sense. Barkley on YouTube says, glad you guys are back. Enjoy your insight. Any thoughts on the young defenseman Baldwin? We talked about him before.
Well, he needs seasoning.
Yeah.
I believe he's slated to go to the Q and then to Providence College. I think he's from Providence. So he's got his amateur career, like he's still going to be an amateur for several more years. What he can do is skate. And I think you could even notice if you followed the game last night or watched the stream, he does have offensive instincts that I don't know how much of it can be taught. What he has to learn is, what can he get away with, right? When the competition is much better. And I think we talked about him earlier in the show, just however many months ago, he's playing against high schoolers.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say he was probably the best player on the ice most nights playing against high schoolers. When, you're trying to make a move around a big-time NHL defenseman because you're up in the play, you have to kind of pick your spots and figure out what you can do and what you can't do. But I liked his game last night. I think of the 4 guys that were drafted last summer, I thought, as I mentioned, Baldwin had the biggest impact.
Boomer says our top guys led the way, which was nice to see. But who, other than the 5 NHLers, stood out to you? We've kind of
we did touch
answered
on
that
at the top of the show.
He said, who's going to be our face-off guy this year? I'm curious how Holmberg will do. Not super encouraging that Finley can't win consistently against non-NHLers.
Well, let's not jump to conclusions about what Finley can or can't do. I think he was under 50% last night. But that was one game. He is a righty, Finley. But they're not going to keep Finley on the team just because he's a right-handed centerman.
Correct.
So what Julian said is he does believe Pontus Holmberg can win draws on his weak side and has shown the ability to do that. If he is going to be first up on penalty kill, which is where Glendening often was because he was taking that face off, I feel like most teams, without getting any data up or anything like that,
the data.
Most teams, when they start a power play, they pick the circle. Most teams, I feel, have a left-handed player taking the face off. Maybe they have one of each, so they can pick a circle. But if Holmberg is the center taking the face off for the Lightning to start a penalty kill, I'm fairly certain that they're going to have the power play unit's going to have a lefty and put Holmberg on his weak side. So that is where the loss of Glendening may be felt. These defensive zone face-offs where he was able to take them on a strong side. And if it went to the other side, maybe the Lightning had a lefty. They had Cirelli, for example. Or Gergensons, who, was often with Glendening and could take a face-off on the other side because Gergensons is also a lefty. So the Lightning are a little bit more limited in who they can send out there to take a face-off to the right of the goalie on a strong side. You've got Point. I mean, that's basically it. And Finley. So was that Boomer who asked the question? Who's going to take face-offs? Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We'll have to wait and see. I'm curious to see how Holmberg does. But he may be asked to take some of these face-offs that Glendening took last year and take them on his weak side.
It's a good point by you. Dustin says, and this was yesterday, watch the third line of Foster, Zada, and Magnosa extra close. They've been incredible in the early camps tournaments.
Well, I'm not sure where he saw they were the quote-unquote third line. To me, they were the fourth line because they were 3 young guys. And therein lies the difference between kind of camp and an actual NHL preseason game. I thought that they were finding their way last night. There was one play where the goalie Primo came out to play the puck. It was in the second period. And I want to say it was either Foster or Zada. One of them, it came outside the trapezoid. So the goalie was out of the net, couldn't touch it. And one of the two lefties, it was either Zada or Foster, got to the puck and threw it in front. Mignosa was there with an open net, and the Carolina defenseman just erased him. It was just like the Carolina defenseman was operating at a slightly faster speed than how those guys could execute, and that's not uncommon, They haven't faced competition like they faced last night. By the way, Mignosa was drafted as an overage, so he was 20, played at Sault Ste. Marie. His teammate, and I would guess his line mate, who's also a righty, was taken 5th overall by Nashville in last summer's draft. So he's 2 years younger than Marco Mignosa. His name is Brady Martin. Brady Martin is in the lineup tonight for Nashville.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Mignosa was actually the leading scorer on Sault Ste. Marie, and Martin was the second leading scorer. But Martin is a big time prospect. So as much as Nashville is dressing a lot of NHL regulars, they're putting this Brady Martin in there tonight to give him a look.
I like it. Lucas says, great to finally have hockey back to talk about and not off-season speculation nonsense. I need Dave to say Stakoviak's name at least 100 more times so I'm able to pronounce it correctly. Kid was really good on the forecheck. Hope to see more of him. I think when you see more vowels,
don't look at how
I think
the
you
name
just
is
stop.
spelled.
You just stop. You're like, I forget it.
I nenever write I have to learn to spell.
Do you
the
write it
name if I'm
phonetically?
writing it.
Do you write it
I
phonetically?
write it phonetically.
You have to, don't you?
Stahoviak, yeah.
Yeah, Stahoviak. You have
I'm
to.
not even thinking about how the name is spelled.
And how do you say his first name again? We had a couple people ask.
Wojtek.
See, that's easy.
There was another Polish
Wojtek.
player who played for Colorado, and this is going back years. Wojtek Wolski. Remember him?
Vaguely.
Maybe you don't. He was a big left winger, a big left-handed centerman. I don't remember which, but he spelled his name with a W. Both first and last names were like they started with a W.
Yeah.
But it was Wojtek Wolski. So Wojtek
Wojtek's
Wolski
easy.
had a less complicated spelling of his first name. Wojtek Stahoviak has more vowels in there, and I'm like, is it really Wojtek? And he's like, it's probably more like Wojciech or something like that. But he's like, just Wojtek. Yeah, Wojtek's fine.
Listen, in
like
3
his
years,
English is fluent. He spent 2 years in college at Michigan State. So I mean,
look, in
he
2
probably
years,
speaks German pretty well too.
he's going to change his name in 2 years if he's playing in the NHL. No, actually, Dave, we're going to go back to what we had before. How many prominent Polish players that have played in the NHL? Can you think, like off the top of your head? I'm trying to think.
He's the one
Yeah,
guy I
is
can
he
think
considered like?
Well, Brian Engblom has done the World Championships. He didn't
Yeah.
do it last year, but he did it the 2 years prior to last year. And he said, where have I seen Stahoviak before? And I'm like, it wouldn't be in the NHL. He played college hockey and then went overseas. I'm like, maybe the World Championships. He's like, that's where I saw him. I said, did Poland have a team? He's like, yeah, Poland had a team. So they can compete in the World Championships. I'm showing my ignorance here. It's not like I'm following the world. Like I know the U.S. and Canada and Sweden. Like I know those countries have teams. I was not aware that Poland had a team that played in the World Championships. They do, and Brian saw this guy play for Poland.
So Krzysztof Oliwa was Polish.
Okay,
Remember him?
yes.
The big.
Another one with a
enforcer.
W that's Oliva. Yeah, because there was a W in the last name.
Who was he was a good player for. Was it the Islanders?
Mariusz Czerkowski? Is that
Yes.
what you're thinking of?
Yes.
Is he Polish?
Polish. I'm
Okay.
Former Polish player, played the Bruins, the Oilers, the
Yeah,
Islanders, the Canadiens.
Yeah.
So he played for a
there
while.
have
He
been
was
a
pretty
few.
good.
There have
And
been a few.
Wojtek Wolski.
Yeah,
right?
that's the guy, Wojtek Wolski. That's who I was talking about.
Yeah. Him too.
Yeah, so I mean, like, Poland is in the
Okay, all right.
area of Europe where you would expect, like, that is probably a sport that is played. Like, we know it's next to Russia, right? Russia has a lot of hockey. It's not that far from the Scandinavian countries that have a lot of hockey. It's actually interesting as many NHLers as we see from Sweden and Finland, we do not see as many from Norway. I mean, there's Lilleberg and there's Felix Ingresorum. And Bjorkstrand is from Denmark. So, like, what is the difference between Finland and Sweden as compared to the other two Scandinavian countries in terms of producing hockey players that can rise to the level of, like, coming to play in the NHL?
I don't know.
And that is a question to which I have no answer because I don't know the situation.
Is it in the water,
enough.
as
But
they say? Is it in the water?
Is the water that different, though, between
know.
Norway and Sweden? They are neighboring
Well, for the
countries.
longest time, wasn't it Finnish-born goaltenders you were seeing a lot?
Oh,
of,
yeah.
right. But it
Yep.
kind of went in cycles because
Yeah.
you saw some Russian goaltenders now, right?
Well, and the Swedish goaltenders.
And the Swedish goaltenders.
Including Johansson, Lundqvist. Yeah.
It's interesting that why do they produce really good goaltenders compared to maybe at another position? And look, size of country, maybe that's, a lot of it too, and whatever that is. But I always find that part interesting. But listen, clearly Wojtek opened up some eyes.
Yeah. Good
And
for
I
him.
think
People
think
watch the stream, or maybe they listen to us, but if they watch
They
the
do.
stream and they're like, who is this guy? That's good.
I want to see him again and again. And
I think we will, just
Yeah.
not tonight.
me
And then
see their-
it kind of, begs the question, the next two games after tonight, because we know the lineup for tonight. The next two games are both home games for the Lightning. Friday against Carolina, Saturday against Nashville. Like, Nashville is dressing a lot of NHL regulars tonight. Will the Lightning follow suit, or are we going to see more of what Carolina did? Which Carolina did that because it was the first game, I think. They have other
Right.
home games coming up. But, will we see more of a steady diet of the actual NHL roster? because the Lightning are playing at home.
Is there a I'm sure there is, so I apologize for the ignorance on this question. Mandated how many NHLers have to lace up?
Yeah,
in
there
preseason?
is a rule of
Is it like
you
5
must dress
maybe?
X number of players who have
it's-
X number
yeah.
of games of NHL
Maybe it's like 5 or
experience.
6.
I don't know what that number is, and nor do I know what the minimum number of games.
Because you have that
would
too in
be.
the AHL, right? You can only sign so many players who are veterans, right?
Veterans,
Yeah,
yes.
you can't have a whole roster of guys who are 28 years old and have played a few NHL games, but they're down.
Well, you can have a roster. Yeah, I mean that's a good question. There is a veteran rule. I don't know what it means to be a veteran though at the AHL level, because I think there are some teams that have experienced pro players playing on their team.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. Dustin, in response to that Foster line that we were just discussing, he said they definitely looked lost earlier in the game, but he felt like they got better in the second and the third periods, Dave.
Well, Mignosa did have that chance in front. There was a lot in the second and third. There were a lot of power plays, and honestly, those three guys were not really seeing power play for sure. Power play. I don't think they saw a lot of penalty kill either.
Yeah.
That limited their ice time.
Matt on YouTube says, assuming the roster is healthy, where would you like to see improvements during the trade deadline, or is that way too soon to think about?
Well, I think it's way too soon.
Yeah, it's too
to
soon.
think about.
It's too soon.
Yeah.
Listen, we love a good trade speculation. And I think we outlined pretty early last year, Matt, I don't know how often you've listened to the show. We did talk about the depth scoring potentially being a little bit of an issue. And according to Julian's actions last year, we felt like we were pretty spot on. He went out and tried to address that. Let's see how this plays out now. Let's give it a few games for sure. What do they always say, partner? American Thanksgiving. You have an idea of maybe what your team looks like.
I mean, this notion that if you're out of the playoffs by the end of November, you basically have a very narrow path to get in. Like some teams have disproven that in recent years, but like bringing it back to, for example, the McDonough contract.
Yeah.
Julian was asked, kind of like, why not extend him? And he's like, well, he's not the only guy. Like we have other guys, right? And even though the cap is going up, you're putting together a puzzle. So it's not just that the Lightning want Ryan McDonough to be on the team beyond this year, but Julian needs to kind of see how the season plays out to make an overall assessment.
Right.
Maybe there's somebody he wants to or needs to bring in that will affect what he can pay other players. And if he commits before this season or during the season, he is pinning himself a little bit more into a corner. So I think the same kind of mindset applies to the trade deadline. You kind of have to see how things are playing out until you can make an assessment and say, okay, this is an area that we'd like to improve upon. Or, we feel like in order to succeed in the playoffs, we need a little bit more oomph in this area. And we're going to target, players that can help us in that regard, which fits exactly what you said. I think last year it was kind of like, all right, secondary scoring, bottom six. We can go get Gordon Bjorkstrand, and they were in the bottom six.
Yeah.
So they would have been able to help the Lightning in the playoffs, except one guy didn't play 1 minute in the playoffs, and the other guy broke his finger, in the first period of the first game. So
I think I'd like to be honest with our audience too. You come here for an opinion, an educated opinion, and I want to at least acknowledge that, Matt. I think for me, some of the things we have been talking about on the show are going to be things I'm looking at to see if they do need to tinker at the trade deadline. So what would that be? Bottom D pair. And let's give that time to play out. What's it going to look like? We don't even know what the combinations are going to look like. I mean, we may have a feel, but do they carry 7 defensemen? Do they want to see more of the Crozier, Lilleberg? Is that even an option to start the season? Let's see how that plays out, but I want to acknowledge that's something I'm going to be looking at because I think the top 4 is pretty much set. Expectations, or there's exceptions to every rule, but I think those guys are set. The other one I think it's going to be a little more interesting Because I don't know if you go out and address it in a trade because you're probably trading for a specific need and skill set is just to see how the power play does. And that might be more of a lot of internal juggling than it is going out and acquiring somebody in a missing piece. But I think, partner, it's fair to say that's going to be something we're watching this year.
Yeah.
I think that, and look, if you don't believe us, listen to Nikita Kucherov's comments about it. You know, whether it's performing when it matters the most in the playoffs, whether it's are we looking beyond who we're scoring against and looking at the chances and the quality of chances, potentially. But more importantly, I mean, they obviously didn't feel like they replaced or came close to replacing Steven Stamkos. And if you feel that's legitimate, let's see how this Point Bjorkstrand combination plays out, assuming they do get a shot. And if that doesn't work, and however many games that is, partner, my sense is there's going to be some internal juggling before there's going to be some sort of move that's made to address what's a perceived weakness at that point. And maybe the Lightning, their power play just operates differently this year, and they get more contributions from the point men. Maybe it's Hedman who ends up having a big year because, yeah, they don't have the one-timer necessarily on the far side, but we know Victor Hedman has a big shot as well. Maybe he ends up having a bigger year despite some struggles if you have it on the left side. I don't know. What I am saying is we're going to find out, but we want to see how that plays out. And I think that's fair. From Mavu on Twitch, did you ever think Radko Gudas, partner, would be a captain in the NHL?
I mean, so we knew Radko when he was right at the beginning of his career, but he was always very well liked by his teammates, not so much by the opponents on occasion. But yeah, like, I'm not surprised. I haven't really been around Radko as he has kind of evolved as a player and as a leader in the NHL. But I don't think that they just handed out the captaincy because they're like, well, we don't have anybody else. Like, he earned it. Most captains do.
He's been around a long time. I think the narrative is veteran defenseman who plays hard and who's seen a lot of things. And if you feel like Radko Gudas can help you not only on the ice but off the ice, then some of that makes sense. But in terms of his style of play, we know he's over the line at times, and I think that's allowed him to play this long. So I think there is some value in that. Who would you compare him to that had a leadership role that maybe you were surprised? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, is it because he's European? I mean, I don't know. So, like,
I think it's how
for
he's
example, his now teammate in Anaheim, Jacob Trouba, was a captain in New York.
And Trouba's similar in terms of style, right?
Yeah, Trouba is not European.
No.
But style, yeah. Scott Stevens was a captain.
Right.
If you're looking at like rugged, hard-hitting defensemen.
Pronger, was always looking for. But those guys were Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
So somebody that's not that.
Well,
and some of that just
Trouba.
might be. Yeah, and some of that just might be the team too. You need some veteran.
Right.
guys.
They have a very young team in
Yeah.
Anaheim. I mean, they're trying to add veteran guys like Killorn and Gudas and Trouba. But I mean, look at their young stars, right? Very young team.
Killorn's interesting. Like, you would think a guy who's won some cups.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's worn the A.
He's worn that, but I mean, like, is in this moment would he be a captain? So to answer your question, surprise? I guess a little bit thinking about it now. But am I going to lose sleep over it? Am I going to be shocked? No. I mean, Anaheim's a young team, so I get kind of where they're trying to fill maybe that void. And look, you have those two guys on the back end. I'm not going to tell you they're going to be stout defensively. I think there's a lot of wear and tear on those defensemen, but you definitely need to keep your head up.
Jackson Lacombe, though.
Right.
Did I talk to you about him last year?
I don't think so.
He's a player.
Yeah, he's good.
They got a really, really good young defenseman in him.
He can play a little bit. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to see some guys play a little bit tonight. Game's
Yeah.
at 8 o'clock, partner, which means
Central
I'm on the air at
time.
7:30.
Yep.
All right, so that means you and I will be talking closer to 8 o'clock. and then we'll do our back and forth, and then recapping the game tomorrow.
Boy, I am getting put through the base. So I mentioned 3 players are doing both of these games, and of course, trainers and the coaches.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Even PR is swapping out.
You're right.
It was Brian Briesman and Stephen Buck. Yesterday, it's Chris Kren tonight. So I am doing both, which means that I've got a couple of late night arrivals. So I may need an extra cup of coffee.
We're here for you
for the show tomorrow, but I will be here.
I think we discussed on Thursday potentially Brian Engblom coming on, so that'll give you a chance to hang out, and we're going to look to do that throughout the year. By the way,
I saw Braden Coburn at an event at Benchmark International Arena last week, and he was like, "I'd love to come on the show." I'm like, "Great!" I mean, we've had him on the show, but we can definitely tap into.
Steve, why don't you get him to come on?
Pat
Have
Maroon,
him come on tomorrow.
Ryan Malone, Adam Hall. I mean, all these guys are going to be working on the broadcast team. Great resources.
Love that. Accomplished players. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we can always bring on Phil.
Yes. Well, Phil will be joining us. Is he doing the games this weekend, Steve?
Steve, do we have breaking news at all that we can share with our audience?
Is he gracing our presence? Or
it's a good question, actually. Yeah,
Steve has checked out
tease
already.
it.
I guess we'll find out when we
can't
find
blame
out.
him. Yeah, can't blame him.
Oh, yes. So
he is. Nice.
He will be there.
Give him a big old hug.
It is interesting to do preseason games with Phil because he does, he still has a great eye.
He does.
For talent.
Yeah.
And, his GM's hat. He never completely, dusted it off. And or he never completely put it away. He does dust it off. And he can look at a player and I like this guy.
I like that player. Yeah, you'll hear him say, I like him, David.
Yeah.
He can skate. That's always, and he does. He's usually right. About those things too, which is always fun. All right, I will talk to you tonight.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, noon to 1, we'll do Power Lunch. Great job.
As
always, thanks to our audience for always participating. We appreciate you guys and gals. Steve Ersnick, thank you. Jared Johnson as well. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to another edition of Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.